So now let's talk about break-even analysis. To analyze a business, we need the cost function C of x along with two other functions. R of x is the revenue function at x units sold. It describes the money received from the sale of products. P of x is the profit at x units sold, and the profit is simply the difference between the revenue and costs. So the revenue R of x from selling x units is the product of the price per unit P and the number of units sold x. So R of x is simply P times x. Notice that this function is a function of x. Also, be careful in using R of x because in some problems x or R of x may be defined in multiples like hundreds of units or thousands of dollars. The profit function P of x is the difference between the revenue function and the cost function. So P of x is equal to R of x minus C of x. Be careful to distinguish little p, which was our price per unit, and capital P of x. The constant is price per item, and P of x is the profit function. Now, when we're interested in break even, we want to know when the company makes a profit. And a company makes profit only when the revenue exceeds the costs. The number of units at which the revenue function is equal to the cost function is called the break-even quantity. The corresponding ordered pair is called the break-even point. So let's take a look at a particular application about publishing costs. Enrique Gonzalez owns a small publishing house specializing in Latin American poetry. His fixed cost to produce a typical poetry volume is $525. His total cost to produce 1,000 copies is $2,675. His book sells for $4.95. So let's go ahead and take all of that information and write it out with our appropriate functions. So C of 0 is equal to 525. C of 1,000 is equal to 2,675. And P, the little p, is 495. I'm going to write that along the top, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find our linear cost function for Enrique's book production. Let's start out with our linear cost function, C of x equals mx plus b. Let's put in our fixed cost information, so that means I need to substitute 0 in place of x, and so m times 0 plus b is equal to 525. That tells me that the b is 525. So that means our fixed costs are 525. Often you can just skip this step, and if they tell you what the fixed costs are, you simply put it in place of b. So now we know that C of x is equal to mx plus 525. Now let's put in the information for C of 1,000. So that means that I have to substitute in place of x 1,000. So we have m times 1,000 plus 525 equals 2,675. So now we can solve this for m. So we have 1,000m equals 2150 after we subtract 525 from both sides. Now we divide both sides by 1,000, and that gives us m equals 2.15. So our slope is 2.15. So we'll put in those two values into our cost function, and we end up with C of x equals 2.15x plus 525. How many poetry books must he produce and sell to break even? To find the break-even point, we need to find the revenue function R of x and set it equal to the cost function C of x that we just found. So R of x is simply the price per item times x, and we found that the price per item was 4.95, so our revenue function is 4.95 times x. So to find the break-even point, we'll take R of x and set it equal to C of x, so that means 4.95 equals 2.15x plus 525. If we subtract 2.15x from both sides, we end up with 2.8x equals 525. If we divide both sides by 2.8, that gives us 187.5. Now keep in mind that this number must be interpreted discretely. In actuality, either 187 or 188 books would be produced because a half a poetry volume is not actually very useful. How many books must he produce and sell to make a profit of $1,000? So to do this, we need to find our profit function and set it equal to 1,000. Now recall that the profit function P of x is equal to the revenue function R of x subtracting C of x, the cost function. If we put in our values, we get 4.95x, that's the revenue function, minus the quantity 2.15x plus 525. The biggest mistake made here is people don't put parentheses around that cost function. Remember, that's a group of items, so it needs to be grouped together. Now when we subtract off that group of items, we need to distribute the negative.
X.
So we get 4.95 minus 2.15x minus 525. Combining our like terms, the 4.95x minus 2.15x gives us 2.8x. So our profit function is 2.8x minus 525. To find where he makes a profit of 1,000, I need to take 2.8x minus 525 and set it equal to 1,000. To solve for x, I'll add 525 to both sides. So we end up with 2.8x equals 1,525. To isolate the x, we'll divide both sides by 2.8. That gives us x equals 544.6. In reality, he's not going to produce 0.6 of a poetry volume, so he's either going to do 544 or 545 books. To ensure that he makes at least 1,000, he's going to produce 545 books. Now let's look at this graphically. So if we graph the revenue and the cost functions, our break-even point was at 187.5, so if I label that on here, you're going to see the point up here is 187.5, and if I was to plug that into each one of my functions, they would be equal at a value of 928.13. So $928.13. Notice that I rounded this to 2 decimal places because this is dollars and cents.